Welcome back to another lesson with me, Mr. B. Today, I'm going to overview how I plan and design my lessons using the Modern Classrooms Project instructional model. Hi, my name is Avery Velasquez, and I teach 10th and 11th grade English. What you just saw is an intro I include in every one of my instructional videos. Just like any storytelling structure, I want to include a beginning, middle, and end for the students, so there's a cadence that they can get accustomed to. I'll dive more into how I plan instructional videos in just a moment. And just to be clear, instructional videos do not have to look like this. I love video editing and making them as a hobby of mine. So in this exemplar unit, you're going to find joint lessons on naturalism and realism from my 11th grade American literature course. The goal of these two is to define and understand the relationship between realism and naturalism. These lessons follow chronologically through various literary movements throughout US history, and is about the 7th or 8th literary movement in the unit that we're going to be learning about. So students have been practicing how to analyze the master or dominant narrative and the counter or non-dominant narrative that's perpetuated by any one of these literary movements. Following these lessons, there will be a mastery check for them to demonstrate how these movements perpetuate the master or counter narrative with evidence from the assigned readings. When I plan my instructional videos, I actually start off planning backwards with the end in mind. So before I even get to my instructional videos, I actually make a unit tracker like you see over here. I tend to plan a few videos at a time, which is why today I'm sharing two joint topics with you all. I personally like recording 2 to 3 instructional videos and then editing them to create a buffer between the next set of videos that will be accessible for our ahead of pace students. Some things I like to think about when chunking out my videos is thinking about, does it need an instructional video and what kind? Is it lecture based? Is it modeling a scaffold? Is it direct instruction? And so this creates a buffer for me when lesson planning for my ahead of pace students. So I do all my recordings at home, and that's just a me thing. I don't want any distractions as I'm recording. A lot of teachers use their prep periods to make instructional videos or make their videos at school, which is a healthy use of their time versus what I do. Again, video editing is a hobby of mine. After I've made a layout of the unit overview and lessons in mind, I'll review the previous set of lessons I made in order to chunk or pare down the content from my old lectures. I'll also script out or make notes related to the curriculum materials just so I have something to reference as I'm recording these, and also have all the necessary tabs, links, and documents open. As for enhancing instructional videos, unless I'm strictly modeling an activity or explaining instructions, I will almost always have a paired activity with the video. I use the question assignment on Google Classroom as a must-do for every lesson, and I use Nearpod, HyperDocs, or Edpuzzles as should-dos or aspire-to-dos interchangeably. As I mentioned earlier, there are many ways to record an instructional video that are less intricate, like using ScreenPal or Zoom. But as you can see here, I like using applications like OBS or Streamlabs to record, and then I use EpicPen, as you saw earlier in this instructional video, to highlight or draw on the text inside of my slides. The screenshots that you're seeing over here are an overview of what I'm looking at on my monitor. I might have a script out just to follow along and have presentation mode open so I can navigate my screen recording. So all of this comes together in some sort of practice for the students. These assignments are formatted using the question assignment feature on Google Classroom, as you can see over here, the little question icon if you use Google Classroom as an LMS. And I organize the lessons with the instructions, some timestamps over here, other options for accessing the reading. As you can see at the bottom of the assignment over here, I have multiple things attached to this assignment. There's a rubric for students to know what are the expectations of the written responses that they need to write. There's a PDF of the reading. We have the instructional video itself. We have access to the slides via Nearpod. And then there's actually also an audio recording of the reading that I do, which is my version of literary analysis for the students, so they have that on the go. And that third box that you saw, which I'll box it again in pink right here, is to let students know that they have the ability to read only, or listen and read along with the PDF. I also provide students with some sentence starters to give them an idea of how to get started, and then I also include a student example of what an aspire to do expectation might look like. So I do review each of the responses that students submit to demonstrate their understanding of the concept. In this case, I'm looking for students to provide evidence from the reading about any connections between realism, slavery, and institutional racism, as shown in the question above. Do you think there are any connections between the definition of realism and the acts of slavery? Do you think that realism could be exclusionary or exclusive to one particular group? If students are also not citing or structuring the responses accordingly to the rubric, I will ask them to revise before moving on. For mastery checks, I always think about how I can make students apply what they've learned. And for these lessons, I don't want it to be just a regurgitation of practice assignments. A lot of my concepts in my curriculum are interconnected, so I tend to link back what we're learning and ask students to draw connections that they see in their own lives or the world around them, while also asking them to provide evidence and some sort of analysis based off of the readings or different media materials that we might have tied to this mastery check and the lessons before this for realism and naturalism. Then for my mastery checks, I also provide feedback via the private comments on Google Classroom, or I could also have one-on-one check-ins with students where I have a different station set up for mastery checks in my room. And then students can also revise their work based on the feedback and resubmit it to improve their grade. So on my individualized tracker over here, we saw in the beginning of the video, there are some assignments on here that are should do. Sometimes it could be a video, reading, or media related to the topic, but not necessary for students to complete the unit. So over here, we have like a YouTube video that I want students to watch that might not be necessary for them to complete a mastery check. And right below that is the whole group tracker, where students can view if they're catching up, on pace, or ahead of pace, who they can collaborate with or ask help from, or they can see if I've given them feedback that they need to check out with the orange highlighted box over here. That signals my students that they need to go back to Google Classroom and to check their private comments to see if I gave them feedback. I hope that was an insightful and in-depth view into how I design or modern classroomify my lessons. If you want to see what a full unit looks like in a video series, you can scan the QR code on the screen to check out a YouTube playlist I have accessible for my students. If you have any questions or want to talk shop about anything from my educator profile, feel free to email me at avery.balaspas@modernclassrooms.org. Thanks for tuning in to another lesson with me, Mr. B, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.